I'm delighted to see everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And to my friends and colleagues who are contributors to a couple of books I want to talk briefly about. This is a second opportunity that we have to spend time as colleagues together and to share some stories that are part of a book that we all contributed to. And I want to tell you just briefly about how we got to where we are today. At the beginning of the pandemic, a colleague, friend in Dublin, Ireland, contacted me. He and I have self-published 10 other books. And he said, Michael, we really have to do something to provide families with some advice and information, because this pandemic is going to just wreak havoc on families. It's going to be very, very difficult. Family conflict is going to increase, the stresses will increase, and we should do something. Why don't you write the book? And I said, well, thanks, Peter. His name's Peter Nicholson. I said, let's see if we can get maybe 25 people to each contribute an article. And within 5 weeks, we published this book called Living Together, Separating, Divorcing, Surviving During a Pandemic. And we had 70 contributors. It was a wonderful experience to bring people together. And Marianne and Allison were contributors to that book. And then, of course, as we all know, the pandemic just keeps chugging along. So a year ago, Peter contacted me and he said, I think it's time to do a second book. And I said, okay, but I have even more ambitious goals this time. And as a result, we produced a second book. And that's called Family Conflict During a Pandemic, Stories of Struggle and Hope. And that book has over 90 contributors from 17 countries and in 9 different languages. It's really extraordinary how people in our field came together to write short pieces, anywhere from 250 to 1,000 words, pieces of about their own experience, about their clients' experiences, and I want to say that the books are available on Amazon for US $1.99. It's the lowest possible price that we could charge, that Amazon would allow us to charge, and every penny that's earned from the sales of the book. And the first year it was about $200. Last year it was about $175. That all of that money is donated to charitable causes, to international organizations that work with families. So that's how we got here. And we're going to today tell some pieces. They may not, some of them may be pieces that actually come from the book. Some are about stories that have occurred and information and ideas that have occurred since then. And the first person I'm going to introduce is a friend and colleague from Tobago, Jillian Lewis. Welcome, Jillian. You have to turn the, yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. And good day to all my colleagues and friends. So nice for us to be together, joining this session. Today, I just want to go straight into Michael's last words, that we have the pandemic going on and so many of us are affected. And I wanted to share experience that sometimes being a mediator could be a casual affair, sometimes it's a business affair. Because I remember over the Christmas occasion, my neighbor called and said, children, we are under quarantine and we have nothing to eat. We were not prepared for this. So she decided to wire some money into my account and said, can you pick up some items? First of all, being 2 boxes of whatever you can get your hand on for my husband and I. So I jumped in the car and I went, having to call her. This is available, chicken, noodles, what do you want? Another time she called again and I said, you know what? This is my neighbor from a former address and she lives next to someone else. And I'm wondering if that person cannot reach out to them. After a period, I realized that they had, what do you call, a falling out. They're not speaking to each other. They had some kind of conflict, border with a fence, and there was a conflict. And I just said, I can't be driving 15 minutes every time they need something or, they call. So I just went and I said, listen, I need the two of you to get along. So I made an arrangement and I said, we're going to speak over the fence. You put on your mask and we on one end and we are going to speak it out. What is the problem? And, I initiated a conversation between the both of them. So no longer did I have to run from 15 minutes away or drive that long just to solve a simple problem. Because during the pandemic, what we're finding is that people are in need. They're lonely. They don't have anybody close to them. But they reach out to people that they know that they can depend on. And that was my role this time. So I just wanted to share that sometime, even in this pandemic, we are not working as mediators, but we are called to duty to help serve and to help to ease someone else's tension. There are so many persons who are suffering quietly, and we are called. But sometimes when we are called, we have to ask ourselves, why wasn't someone else called? And because there's conflict and underlying tension that we need to resolve so that people can get along to exist and operate during this pandemic. So I just wanted to share that with my colleagues there today. Thank you. We will now listen to Alison's contribution. Alison?
Thank you, Gillian. Hello, everyone. Very glad to see you all today. And it's a real privilege to be speaking again with a panel of such wonderful global mediators and family professionals. I'll perhaps just introduce who I am. So I am a family lawyer and a mediator, an arbitrator, a collaborative practitioner, a non-practicing counsellor. And what I'm actually going to talk with you about today is a bit about child inclusive mediation, as we call it here in the UK. I'm also very privileged to have my colleague with me, Caitlin, who's going to touch on some of the other methods of dispute resolution that we use here in the UK to help families. And I'm sure we have all found that family disputes have just been operating at a much heightened level of anxiety and difficulty during this really quite dreadful time of the pandemic. I am a partner with a law firm in England called Mills and Reeve. Caitlin is one of my fellow partners. I'm actually based in Manchester, well, just outside of Manchester. Our office is in Manchester, and I live on the edge of the Peak District National Park in a little town called Glossop, for any of you who might have heard of that. And I gather it's very, very cold in Canada there today, and I have to say it's actually quite pleasant here. And the sun was even shining. It's known for rain where I live, so that's an improvement today. So just to talk a little bit then about child inclusive mediation, and I think it's particularly important at the moment because here, and I'm sure this is a global phenomenon as well, there's been a massive increase in mental health issues amongst children and young people. And there was a statistic, it's Children Mental Health Week here this week. There has been a 77% increase in the number of children needing specialist treatment for severe mental health crisis in a period of time during last year relative to the pre-pandemic times. And that's also reflected, I think, broadly amongst the adult population as well. So that's obviously impacting on parents. And here we have a mediation code of practice, which requires us as mediators to offer children, when we're mediating with their parents, children who are aged 10 or over, to have the opportunity to speak with mediators and to have their voice heard. And there aren't that many mediators actually who are qualified to do that in England. And so I'm not sure at the moment that all of the children who should have that opportunity are being given it. But I'm privileged to have been trained to do that and to meet with children in mediation. And I'm sure many of you there do that also. And it's a huge privilege and I enjoy doing it very much. So I just thought I'd share a little story about a family that I've worked with, and also just to tell you a little bit about how it works here, because I suspect it will be different in different jurisdictions. So here, how it works is it's not the same as having children involved in court proceedings or with a social worker. It really is just an opportunity for them to have a meeting with me as the mediator so that they can share their views. And that's done completely in confidence. So there's no report writing or anything like that afterwards. And in my experience, this really focuses the minds of parents on thinking about how their children are really feeling about the fact that they're going through difficulties, a family separation or whatever it may be, and to look at it from the children's perspective. And it helps parents to really feel more accountable for their children's concerns and worries, but also gives them an opportunity to celebrate the good parenting that they're doing. Because as a mediator, the last thing I want to do is to make parents feel even worse about the situation than they already do. So how it works here is that I will meet with the parents first, and if we all think it would be appropriate for the children to have a voice, then we'll invite them to come and meet with me. And that has to be on the basis that the parents may not hear anything following that meeting, because everything they tell me is in confidence. And it is really up to them as to what they would like to share. Assuming they want to share something, which invariably they do, otherwise they probably wouldn't really want to meet with me in the first place, then I can report that back to parents. And this only happens if we are all sure that this is going to be a positive experience for children, and that parents aren't going to coerce them into saying something, coach them, or indeed grill them afterwards about what they've said. So I thought I'd just give you an example of a family where they have two children. For the purposes of our discussion, I'll call them Zainab, who's 15, and Ali, who's 13. And the couple have been separated for 6 years, and they had a court order saying that that both of the children should live with their mum for some of the time and then stay with their dad one night a week and for alternate weekends. During the pandemic, things became very much more difficult, and particularly because dad had formed a new relationship with a new partner, and relations with mum became more difficult. And that also coincided with both children becoming more independent. So Zainab stopped going to her dad's, and Ali and his mum were rowing a lot. And sometimes Ali would just leave and go to his dad's and not come back. So partway through one of the lockdowns during the pandemic, Ali left his mum's house, where he spent more of his time, and just stayed at his dad's and wouldn't return. And Zainab stayed at her mum's and just didn't see her dad at all. And as a result, dad reduced the amount of child maintenance that he was paying. And every time that the parents spoke with each other, they were rowing, and angry emails and texts between them ensued. And then mum had actually issued a court application to enforce the order, and dad called me initially for legal advice, and then I suggested perhaps mediation might be a good way forward. So I met with both of them and just talked about the realities of the situation, the challenges that they were both facing as a result of the pandemic, and their difficulties trying to parent their two children. And they were both unsure really about what their children wanted and needed right now. So we agreed it would be a helpful thing for them to be able to meet with me. So then I met with both of the children and talked with them about what they hoped and wanted out of their family life at home. Met with each of them separately so that they could speak to me in confidence. And so this happened on Zoom because of the pandemic. I don't know how you are mediating there at the moment, whether you're also mediating on Zoom and whether you're meeting children on Zoom. And it became clear that Zainab's loyalties very much lay with her mum, and she wasn't ready to form a relationship with her dad's new partner. And Ali wanted to spend more time with his dad, but also to be able to see his mum and sister, which was something that had not been happening for a while, but not to be forced to do so. So just to cut a long story short, because I'm conscious of time and want to hear from everybody else, both of their parents had recognised the damage that would be done to the children if they continued with this court application, quite apart from the time it was going to take to be able to do that within a pandemic. And so having heard actually what both of the children wanted and realising the importance for them of actually the two of them being able to reach an agreement, and a flexible one that would work, not constrained by the boundaries of a court order, they did reach an agreement. It took 3 meetings in total for them to reach an agreement. And they agreed that they would both encourage Zainab to spend time with her dad as and when she felt able to do that, initially without his new partner there. And then the arrangements for Ali would be the reverse of the court order. So he'd spend more time with his dad and then come and see mum and see his sister during the week and alternate weekends. And then they were going to review in 6 months. And they also agreed that no child maintenance would be payable either way. So overall, I think that was a much better outcome for the children than the contested court hearing would have produced. So that's just an example of how child inclusive mediation works. I'm conscious of time, so I could go on and talk about a couple of other ways in which we mediate, but I think that's probably enough for me now. So I'll hand over to my partner and colleague, Caitlin Jenkins.
Thank you, Alison, and hello everybody. I was going to say good afternoon because that's what it is here in Cambridge in the UK, which is where I'm based, but I appreciate it's good day to everybody across the globe. It's a privilege to take part in this discussion. Thank you for inviting us, Marianne. Alison's touched on various aspects of mediation, so I thought I would just give some examples, a couple of stories from other forms of dispute resolution of what we probably used to call alternative dispute resolution, but in the UK we've managed just about to move forward so that we call it get people to talk about dispute resolution on the basis that anything that isn't court doesn't have to be alternative. It could be front and centre in court to the way to sort out family disputes. So there were a couple of areas that I thought I could mention because they felt as though there were some quite positive stories that had come out of the pandemic. One was a story about a collaborative case and one was around arbitration. So the collaborative process, I may be speaking about it to those who already know about it because I have a feeling that in England we stole it from North America. So I apologise if you already know about collab. But the collaborative process involves a series of meetings between the two lawyers and the two clients, all in one room together, gets rid of what can often be highly positional and increasingly toxic correspondence between lawyers. It also crucially involves people agreeing to negotiate in a different way, letting go of a sort of positional based bargaining approach, trying to hold on to what's the best thing for them as opposed to thinking about it from the family solution. And it also means the lawyers have to buy into it too, because the lawyers sign up to the agreement as well, which means that if the process doesn't work, those lawyers can't take those clients' issues to court. So very brief overview of a collaborative process. And the story I wanted to tell you about was a positive that came out of the pandemic, in that there's lots of negatives, and certainly in the UK, and I suspect that's not unusual across the world, the courts have really, really been struggling. Our courts in England were already struggling with overwork and lack of investment, and the increased number of cases relating to children, particularly during the pandemic, has really clogged the courts up. And so anything that finds a solution for families that doesn't mean that you need court time has been enabled families really to move forward and not get too stuck. And that's what happened to this collaborative case. There was a couple who, for various reasons, the lawyers explored mediation with them, but for various reasons I won't go into, mediation wasn't really appropriate for them. They needed lawyer advice in the room, and they needed advice and they needed to get a solution quickly because they had a very disabled child. And the collaborative process enabled them to, it was like a light bulb when we talked to them about the collaborative process, went on over their heads, both parents. They sort of thought, oh my goodness, we don't have to wait for a court to sort this out. We can keep responsibility of this and we can have our discussion, but we can also use the lawyers in the room to help and guide us as well. And the reason it was particularly powerful in the collaborative process for this couple was speed. and also ability to deal with it on Zoom because of various other practical constraints, and the ability, most importantly, to keep their child who had significant issues at the front and centre in a good way in the middle of their discussions, because in their anchor statements at the start of the collaborative process, they both explained that they needed to deal with this in a way that wasn't courts, wasn't animosity, wasn't conflicted, and was speedy for various health reasons for both of them, because they had a disabled child who they were living in a house that was adapted for the particular needs of that child. And so any court-based approach selling the house just was not something they could contemplate. And so the pandemic pushed them towards the collaborative process, I think, perhaps because they were told that the courts could take months, if not years, to get them to where they needed to be. But actually, it was a process that fitted for them. And I took it actually as a positive that we were able to get them into that process, and they were able to discuss and sort the arrangements out in a guided way with advice in the room to come up with an outcome that worked for them. And it certainly was not an off-the-shelf type outcome because of the particular circumstances they had. So that was my one of my positives from an example of using a different type of dispute resolution. And then the other one was an arbitration example. So again, forgive me if you have arbitration and use it frequently in your jurisdiction. Arbitration in family cases in England is relatively new. It's been around a few years now. We can have arbitration for children disputes. We can have arbitration for financial disputes arising on a divorce. And basically, it's a process that mirrors a court process, but is you effectively employ a private judge. You pay usually a lawyer, sometimes a retired judge, sometimes a barrister, to be the judge in your case. And in all bar exceptional circumstances, the family courts will then ratify the judgment, the award that the arbitrator has made. And I'm a financial arbitrator, Alison's a financial and child arbitrator. And why was this a particularly helpful, promising thing in the pandemic? Well, I've mentioned the courts were extremely clogged up. And the example I had was getting a phone call as an arbitrator from a solicitor that I knew saying, Caitlin, we need your help. There was a family who had a final hearing of an issue around finances that had been in the diary for many, many months, in fact, if not almost a year, in a court timetable diary. For a couple of days later. And because of the pandemic and illness and pressures on the court pulled the hearing 2 days beforehand. And everybody was ready. This family had psyched themselves up to have a decision on these financial arrangements, as it were. They'd paid their barristers, they'd got all the evidence in, they were ready, they needed it. And they were emotionally, most importantly, they and their children were emotionally ready to get this case sorted out. And so, as it happened, I was able to step in to be the arbitrator, and we stuck almost to the timetable with a bit of leeway so we could read in, and we were able to provide the family with that solution, not from a court judge, but from a private arbitrator. And at the end of the case, both of the parties were really grateful that we'd able to manage to help them towards a solution, which again was a positive that a different version of a dispute resolution could help them sort it out. So those are my two examples of positives. Just to throw in something that I think perhaps we could learn from the rest of the world on, and definitely could, but is what we're not very good at in England at the moment, although we're all looking at it, is MED-ARB, so mediation moving into arbitration. We're quite we would like the idea of if a mediation fails, and hopefully it wouldn't, but if a mediation failed, then people wouldn't have to go to the back of that long court-based queue that I mentioned earlier, and could move straight into some sort of arbitration process, hopefully to sort out any last issues. The English regulatory system for solicitors and barristers struggles with the idea that you have two clients, one lawyer. We're set up in this very old-fashioned, conflicted way, positional way, and it's something that's being looked at the moment. But certainly that's something that's been challenging Alison and I. We've been having discussions about it. So that's something we're not so good at, and we could most definitely learn from others and improve on. So, but those are my sort of stories that I wanted to share, and I think I'm passing over now to Sarah if she's there. She was having tech issues earlier, so to Sarah if she's there.
Yes,
Sarah.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. So perhaps just to be able to share my experience in the recent past, just being able to go through mediation with different people. Of course, we are all aware that the issues of the pandemic has brought about quite a number of disputes. And as now people are trying to move on, then people are also trying to address those disputes. And my experience has been that a lot of times people come in with a lot of, so to say, baggage, and having not had places where they are able to speak and be able to express themselves. One of the things that I am having to do as a mediator is to give space for people to be able to just talk through some of the things that may not even appear sometimes to be related to the issue that is at dispute. But the other thing that I have also experienced while listening in and going through the mediations is that they have also weighed down on me personally as a mediator, just being able to listen to other people and sort of help them carry that weight. So I think for me, part of what I am learning and I would encourage us is just to really seek help. I think a lot of people need therapy, some need counseling, and if as a mediator you're able to perhaps identify, advise the clients, perhaps sometimes they may even need to receive this kind of help before they actually go through the mediation process. And then for ourselves as well as mediators to be able to just, yes, think about ourselves too. And when necessary, I think be able to just step back and take time to recharge. And I think sometimes that might even call for us maybe in some instances to decline some mediation if you feel that it is actually just weighing you down and having an impact on you. Some good news again from Kenya. I'm from Kenya, and today I saw a call for political parties, a dispute tribunal, so people can apply to be members. And that is just in preparation for this year. We have our elections in August, and of course, around about the election issues, there are quite a number of disputes. So at least it is a good thing that, in preparing the tribunal and having more people coming in as members, then it means that if there are any disputes, as is likely to occur, then those will be addressed in good time, which is a good thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's just such a pleasure to hear, and I hope that all of you on the call, there's over 60 of us here listening in, which is wonderful, hearing about what's happening in other countries around the world. And I will mention Dina Labrizzi was going to be here from Italy, and she couldn't make it today, so we'll hear from Italy next time. But so wonderful to hear from all of you. I wanted to just add a few minutes about what's happening here in Ontario for our international guests and panel as well. And so when we're thinking about mediation and this continued pandemic, I think it was Allison asking if we're mediating online, and a lot of us are. There's a lot of people who are mediating continued online and see that actually is quite a future focus. I wanted to share a little story about how the online dispute resolution method actually really helped me in a case recently where there was extreme domestic violence, and picking up a little bit of what Sarah said as well about readiness for mediation and self-care and all those other good things. I could talk for a long time about those pieces, but the case I had, there was a serious use of a weapon from a father against a mother. This was a family who had no previous history with domestic violence. It was a very stressful time in their family. There was financial stress due to losing of income from a self-employed business that likely contributed to the anxiety and feelings of conflict in the family. It resulted in a very terrible incident. The police were called. The father was taken to jail. And I met the family sometime after this, where emotions were still high. And so I think that we take domestic violence screening for safety and process design very seriously in Ontario and across Canada. And so the first initial instinct is kind of a gasp at the story that had happened, and then a listening for what the family needed, what were the next steps that they wanted to take. And they had some time pass between the incident and the intervention into separation by me as their mediator. And Children's Aid, Children's Services had been involved, and there had been multiple interventions in terms of safety, counseling, as you spoke about, Sarah, like the need for readiness to actually come to a mediation. People have to understand what happened to them. How did they get to this state? There was a lot of shame on both mama and dad's part. Dad especially didn't know how he had let it got to this level. A lot of insight into the violence and what had happened. And we talked as we were preparing for this about apology, and there was apology in this case. They were never going to get back together. The parenting plan was never going to be one that was easy. But as time passed, we worked in the shuttle system on Zoom. So we had different days, different times for meetings. Neither parent knew when the other parent would be meeting with me. And we ended up with something that they could live with. It's not perfect, but it's something they can live with. And I think it really was a message to me that even in the face of extreme violence and really significant challenges for a family, that we can use mediation in a process that's designed to meet the needs of the family in a safe way. And I really think that, avoiding the additional contacts with court, because they had to go through peace bonds, and he now has a criminal record. There's just all of these things that are weighing very heavily on the family, and to be able to give them relief in the separation and to be able to negotiate the child support or maintenance in the UK, it sounds like it's called, a spousal support, what to do with their property. It could all be resolved in a way that didn't add to their conflict load, and it was a nice it was a good ending to a very, very tragic story. And I feel that, with future years behind them and the commitment that they're making, that they're going to do really well. So I also wanted to note about the cooperation that we're seeing with families. So they're as we go through all sorts of quarantines and lockdowns and that sort of thing, I'm noticing more and more families are saying things to me like, what if we celebrated this holiday together or that holiday together as a family of 5 or 4 or 3? And that families are sort of recognizing that the very nuclear family unit may need some space to be with each other. And sort of, I think that families are recognizing the importance of each other when they're cut off from their extended family due to restrictions. So I think that's been a real positive that I've noticed coming out of the pandemic. The other quick mention, and I was so happy to hear about child inclusive mediation from Allison. I think that's child protection mediation, child inclusive mediation are 2 key areas of focus here in Canada too. We have another model of mediation that used to be called elder mediation, and now it's called name change to intergenerational family mediation, which is use of mediation across the generations. So where we have in the pandemic, maybe a sibling moves in with mom and dad, and there's a sibling dynamic where there's conflict in the home around, like, why is that person getting there to stay for free? What's going to happen with the inheritance? Where's what's the family unit looking like? And so the use of, just very quickly, intergenerational family mediation has been something that the OIFM has sponsored over the past year, and also is supportive of promoting. So it's a neat outcome out of the pandemic, I think. So With that, I don't want to take up too much more time because we've got Michael to speak, and then we'll also want your questions and answers too on the chat. So over to you, Michael.
Great. Thanks very much, Marianne and Jillian and Allison, Caitlin, and Sarah, for for being part of this webinar and for being part of the book and the opportunity to share something together and to reach across the miles. It's just an extraordinary gift to be able to do that. I want to talk for a couple of minutes about something that about a problem that I hope is unique to the United States. I pray that it is, that you're not experiencing similar kinds of things in your countries and with families in your countries. Before I do that, I want to reiterate what Marianne has said. Please ask questions. You can use the chat. You can do it starting now and ask questions. We're monitoring the chat to, I don't even mind being interrupted in the middle, but we'll see how that goes. But we certainly would like to hear from you. Comments are welcome as well as questions. So there are two sort of unique, two situations that are unique to the pandemic that may also be unique to the United States. And these are situations that I've encountered. One in which divorced parents, separated or divorced parents, are in dispute over whether their children are allowed to play with children whose families are not vaccinated. This was a particular dispute that was quite intense, and it goes on. I mean, you'd think that here in the United States we have a surplus of vaccines and a deficit of people who have been willing to accept them. Some for very legitimate and understandable reasons, some simply because of politics, unfortunately. And in this particular dispute, it was very, very difficult for the mom and the dad, because one of them felt very, very strongly that the children, and it wasn't just that the children might become ill, but it was that if the children become ill, there's the probability, if not the almost certainty, that parents and others who interact with those children are going to become ill. And the other, parents said, look, kids don't really get sick. Don't worry about it. They're not that troubled by the virus. Anything that happens, they'll recover very quickly. And really dismissed the whole idea, had a quite laissez-faire and relaxed and easygoing attitude about it. And it took 3 meetings. They were very, very difficult conversations to have. Just as we all know, conversations about values as opposed to time or money, those aren't easy problems to help parties resolve. But when it comes to values, things that people hold deeply, about their religions, for example, about whether a child should be or shouldn't be brought into religious education and observance. This was very much like disputes that I've seen before, that are values based. And they ultimately agreed that the children would, at least for a period of time, until the positivity rate for tests in the community dropped below 5%, that the children would not be allowed to play. So they had a benchmark they were using for saying, and it was interesting because what they mirrored was what the school system and the community was using to decide whether children had to be masked or they could attend school without masks. So they drew upon a specific objective, relatively objective determination to make that decision, and that's how that particular dispute came about. And the other one that was much more troubling, and in fact was never resolved, despite a couple of heartfelt and incredibly intense meetings with the parents, was about vaccination. Vaccines are available here to children in the United States, to children as young as 5. And there's now a proposal to approve them for infants as well. That hasn't yet, I don't think, has been decided. And these children in this family were between the ages of 5 and 12. One parent had a scientific background. She was a scientist. She wasn't a virologist. She was not an epidemiologist. She wasn't a physician, but she was a scientist. And she believed in the value of science, the importance of facts in making a decision. And she read extensively. She didn't just rely on what happened to come across in the newspapers or news on TV. She read reports so that she felt she was really educated. She was making a thoughtful and educated decision. And the dad, who was an otherwise very thoughtful, reasonable, responsible individual himself, they were quite extraordinary. But he believed that children should not be vaccinated, even though he recognized that his children, in order to go to public school, had to receive other vaccinations where they couldn't take part in public education. Nevertheless, when it came to this, he was persuaded by whatever means, and I don't know what they were necessarily, that the vaccine was too rapidly produced, developed and produced. There wasn't enough experience with whether it had a long-term effect on children. He was vaccinated himself, so he didn't have a problem per se with the idea of vaccines. He just said, not for my children, absolutely not. And they couldn't reach an agreement. And they ended the mediation frustrated, disappointed, discouraged, and yet recognizing that they simply weren't going to solve this particular conundrum. And they both they shared equal responsibility for healthcare decisions. So neither one could just arbitrarily take the children. The mom couldn't just take the children and have them vaccinated. Okay, I want to share one last thing before we take some questions. Hopefully my screen sharing will work and we'll be able to do this. Yes. So, my friends, and I'm speaking specifically to you, Barbara Landau, who I hope is still on here. We're doing a third book. This one also is going to be about stories of struggle and hope. The subtitle is "We Thought It Was Over, and Then." And so here we are. We're in our third year of this wretched disease, and it's and the extent to which it's tearing apart the fabric of our communities and our families, and causing just enormous stress and it's just been horrific. This particular year, in terms of stories about struggle and hope, we're going to focus on two elements that my colleague Peter and I think are probably really part of what everyone's experience is, and that's fatigue and grief. What I want to say is I'm going to be posting this in the next few days on social media, and I want to invite every single person who's on this call to contribute. As I said, last year we had 92 or 93 contributors. This year, I'm hoping for at least 125. I'm pushing for 25 different countries and 12 to 15 different languages. If you want to submit something in a language other than English, we will publish it. We will publish it whether you provide an English translation or not. If you care to provide the English translation along with it, that's terrific. We will publish both. The essays are relatively brief, 250 to 600 words thereabouts, and we've pushed the date back to April 1st for receipt of them, hoping that we will be able to publish this by May 1st. So that's my pitch for the moment about this book. Great.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
there's a question from Nicole. I'm just going to grab my chat box back up again. It is talking about something in Ontario that we struggle with is promotion of the use of family mediation. And the writer would like to know how well known is family mediation in your countries, and is it supported by the government? Is there any government funding of the program? So maybe we'll start in, who would like to go first? I guess that would be Sarah or Jillian. Okay, I saw you unmute, Jillian.
Once you say children, as a school administrator, I tend to just say, let me get in there. In Trinidad and Tobago, what we're experiencing at the moment, this current week, is the reopening of school for the primary ages. I don't know how you term it in your country, but the children who are under 13, 12 and under, they have to do a national assessment. And so at the end of March, they should be doing that assessment. So we have had the reopening of school. And, coming right off of what Michael said, the fear of some parents not wanting their children to associate with others because they're not vaccinated. In our country, at the age of 12, you can be vaccinated. But even the parents themselves are shying away and using religion, they're using the speed. Same thing Michael just said, the rapidness of the development of the vaccine. They're using several excuses not to get themselves vaccinated or to have their children or child vaccinated. So what is happening now is we are open, school is open, there are many policies set in place by each school, how to handle it, but the broader picture is there's a genuine fear of people wanting to, I would call it, be vaccinated. Now, I'm not going to discriminate, and it's not for me to say who should or should not take the vaccine. But at this point, there are several parents who chose not to send their children to school. And we have our teachers union up to last night, I was in a meeting trying to decide whether we should still be doing online learning and at the same time doing face-to-face. Because there's some parents who refuse to send their children out to school, but they still want the child to be educated or prepared for the examination. Also in the high school, some form 1 to 6, meaning advanced level, wherever you are in the world, they have to be out at school. So these are large population and they have to go on a rotation because as one speaker said, the schools were built many years ago and nobody predicted this pandemic. So the space is a problem. And in our country, for the primary school, they have moved from the 6 feet to 3, which is really crazy. So those who have comorbidities, teachers or administrators, they themselves have fears of going out. But, as I started this session today, I said, I didn't want to talk about school because we just opened and we're dealing with everything that's happening. But it was good to see Michael bring that right back to what I didn't want to discuss. It is the pandemic and we need to discuss it. And we would have tried to talk to parents, reach out, many ads to get people to open up and speak about their fears. And some cases is successful and some is not. But I like what Sarah was saying before about self-care. At the end of the day, we preach a lot of self-care in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's really a personal decision, but at the same time, we all want the pandemic to come to an end.
Right.
So I don't know how we're going to get there, but being in school right now, it is overwhelming. And the vaccination talk, it's not common to anywhere. It's happening around the world. People are choosing homeschooling. People are saying they want educators, teachers to do double role, which is against our union regulation in Trinidad and Tobago. So I don't know if that helped, Marianne, but that is our perspective from Trinidad and Tobago. In a school administrator right now.
Thank you, Jillian.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jillian.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marianne, please.
Oh, I was wondering about the use of mediation as self-care in Trinidad and Tobago. Is it commonly used as something that feels good to people, and does the government fund it at all?
They have run several sessions, put out ads. Individual schools have requested that whole concept of self-care. But at the end of the day, we talk, I heard someone talk about the old intergenerational, there's a lot of people displaced because of COVID. I myself, you all know, I moved back with my mom because she needed someone to be with her. And while they were talking, I don't know if everybody feeling it. They're not feeling the peace, because the quarantines, they have you're isolated, so you're left with your own thoughts. And the self-care, although we can say it, I don't know if people are feeling it and taking the time out for themselves. So yes, they're talking about it, but I don't know if people themselves have so much trauma in their brain that they don't want to deal with themselves, and the self-care is not taking a personal effect as it should. Mm-hmm. So we really need to work on that as a country and as individuals, even us as professionals. Mm-hmm. We speak it, but we have to do it for ourselves too.
That could be a whole other webinar, I think, Julia.
You're telling me.
I think Alison wanted to say something about the.
Thanks, Alison.
Yeah.
I was just going to answer your question, Nicole, about how well known family mediation is in the UK by the general public, and I think it's a bit mixed. I think still the default is to think about court and lawyers if there's a problem, and either you can afford it or you can't afford it. But there is actually some financial support from government. So again, this isn't actually well known amongst the general public, or indeed amongst the lawyer group, that legal aid, public funding is available for mediation. It's means tested, but it is available. And at the moment, we also have, as of last year, a voucher scheme, which means that the first £500 will be funded by the government if the mediator is signed up to this scheme. And that's for any family dispute which involves a dispute about children, but you can use it to resolve the dispute about finances as well, as long as there's also an issue about children. And that's not means tested at all. So that's initially there was £1 million set aside for that, which is obviously a drop in the ocean, really, but the scheme has been consistently extended and it's still present at the moment. We've still got funding, we think, through till sometime in March. So it is supported, but yeah, it's still not as well known as I think most mediators would like it to be. So I think that's the answer to that question. And you also asked about whether there are other alternate means of resolving disputes. We have quite a thriving community mediation practice in the UK as well, although again, how well known that is amongst the general public, I don't think it is. But if you're operating, for example, I think some of the large estates that contain council housing, so government funded housing, have community mediation schemes that are used to resolve neighbour disputes, but could also be used to resolve intergenerational disputes. But again, I don't think it's very well known. So hopefully that answers your question, Nicole, from an English perspective, at least.
Thank you so much.
I think Sarah wanted to add something about what happens in Kenya.
Yes, I think there is some awareness of family mediation, perhaps not as much as should be, But again, I think there is a very steady, slow but steady awareness of mediation. So you find institutions like FIDA that provide support in terms of mediation, and use mediation a lot to be able to help to solve family issues. In terms of government support, then we have the Court Annexed Mediation Program. Some of the family matters are screened and they are taken for mediation, and it is the government that covers the costs of the mediators. Apart from that, then we, in some courts, then there is the Children's Service Week, which is a week dedicated to mediating the cases involving children. So that is very good, because then it helps to push through a good number of cases and have them concluded. Yes, thank you.
Michael, I'll hand the last word over to you. We've got about a minute left.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Again, first of all, thank you to OAFM and to you, Marianne, for organizing and hosting this gathering. Selfishly, it gives me a chance to see, Sarah and Allison and Caitlin and Jillian and you, and to share time together, and to talk about the importance of sharing this information, these ideas, the stories, with as many people as possible. So thank you for that. And again, my pitch for everybody on this webinar, contribute to our next book. You'll become a published author. It's a wonderful experience. If you want to know more, Marianne, if you don't mind, could they contact you and then you'll get in touch with me?
Yeah, of course. Anyone, send me an email, director@OAFM. I'll pop it in the chat. Most of the people here know me, so it's
that's what I was
sure we'll be in
thinking,
touch.
rather than doing mine.
Yeah. Okay. Or I could put yours in the chat too, Michael.
I'll do it.
Okay, awesome.
I know we're running out of time. That's why I was.
These are the two books I think that the Michael had up earlier, but it was a pleasure to contribute. I hope that many of you do from OAFM members, because you've got a lot to add. It's a beautiful experience. I was telling Michael I was dreaming about what I was going to write. So he apologized for the nightmare. I said, it's a dream. It's such a wonderful experience. And to read these stories is just like this hour we've all spent together. It's one person put in the chat, we're not alone. And it just feels really good to know that you're all out there doing this good work. So be good to yourselves today. And thank you so much to everyone on the panel, and to Michael, and to everyone who came. A wonderful turnout from OAFM for all of us. So thank you. Marvelous.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye. Bye, Mervyn. I'll stop recording now. Excellent.